Good morning and welcome to our AWS Storage and Rubrik Explained webinar. My name is Matt Compton. I head up the data management team at Bytes, and today I'm joined from Tom from AWS and James at Rubrik. So today's webinar is really around leveraging cloud. Bytes have helped customers over the last few years to adopt cloud technology where appropriate. And once adopted, make sure that we are optimizing the cost and usage of those workloads in the cloud. And we all find ourselves in a very different situation to where we were just a few months ago. And we've found businesses found it more relevant that data was accessible. And using some legacy infrastructure or access points has made it very, very difficult to access data that they have traditionally stored in places that require a person on premise to be able to manage that kit. So we're finding a huge uplift and shift towards cloud. But with that becomes its challenges and how do we get to that data to the cloud. And today's webinar is all around working with our two key partners, two bleeding edge technology partners, all around the infrastructure, the IaaS, the infrastructure as a service, and also the platform, the data mover that allows you to get that data into the cloud and manage it and have all the management tools that you have to have the true governance around that data. So first of all, we're going to be joined by Tom, then we're going to pass over to James at Rubrik, and then I'll come back at the end just to cover off high level of kind of Bytes and how we wrap some services around this. And then we'll finish off with a bit of Q&A. So with that, I'll be handing over to Tom.
Thank you very much, Matt. So hello, everyone. I want to talk briefly about AWS storage services and how we enable partners to build solutions that really help scale customers' businesses. So first of all, my brief agenda outline is giving you an overview of our different forms of storage, growing with your cloud journey, leading into what customers are building and how based on our S3 storage platform. I'll briefly talk about the importance of durability, and then our storage gateway from a hybrid perspective, leading then into part integrations where I'll be handing over to Rubrik. So we've got an awful lot of choice for more applications to be running in public cloud. A lot of you may have heard about Amazon and our EC2 compute. And along with that is usually required a little bit of EBS or elastic block storage. This is really like the block storage you'll be using on premises today. So when we rehost platforms into AWS, traditionally applications and workloads may be moved in, and this is where they'll live. When we think about replatforming workloads, we're thinking about using elastic file services, potentially our storage gateway family, which I'll cover briefly later. Maybe our file systems for Windows File Server or for Lustre. There are also some different things we can look at for native backup services, different levels of block storage, and different levels of our S3 object store as well. Now, I'm happy to take questions on any of these a little bit later. So how do we grow with your cloud journey? Now, quite often, customers will look at a very small project to get familiar with public cloud. And once there's a familiarization, maybe more projects will come on board. Maybe you'll build that foundation of your cloud services that you offer out to your customers or that you consume yourselves, leading more into workload migration, and then finally what we call reinvention. Now, there are two lines here on this little graph. The green one is what we call the cloud native journey, where businesses that are born in the cloud rapidly grow, such as Netflix, Airbnb. Then the blue line, which is a little bit lower down, is more traditional organizations who have a significant on-premises data center presence. Now, if I put this into context of a more traditional backup and recovery approach, a simple project could be a backup to cloud, leading into maybe DR to cloud. Then we're thinking about hybrid storage migration, so maybe moving your primary storage into public cloud, then backing up those workloads in public cloud, maybe even DR in public cloud. So looking at protecting workloads across multiple locations to ensure that you've got availability in the event of any potential disaster. Now, we talk about retiring technical debt, which is really reducing reliance on some maybe older technologies and moving those technologies towards public cloud. So how does S3 fit into this message? Well, what are customers actually building? Backup and restore is often the first workload that we see moving into public cloud, followed quite closely by archive and compliance. And what's really interesting is these are two very easy places to start your cloud journey. And we're integrated with all major vendors. We can offer media workflows, tape replacement across all verticals and most horizontals as well. Home directories is an interesting one we can move across because we see most unstructured storage in customers' environments is Windows file service. So with FSX for Windows, we can help move a lot of those workloads into public cloud and reduce the cost to manage on premises. What's a data lake? Data lake is really a large storage area where those unstructured areas of data can be brought on board, and we can use that as a basis for analytics, streaming data, and visualizing your data. Then we move into business critical applications. A lot of business critical applications live on S3 now. We can provide a fully managed infrastructure around that, offering both lift and shift migrations and complete re-platforming. Now, there are a lot of different cost models which we can bring into play around Amazon S3 storage. So on the left-hand side here, we have our standard S3 storage, which is really designed for active, frequently accessed data. This is where you may need millisecond access for day-to-day storage activities, leading right across to the right-hand side on something that we call Deep Archive, so S3 Glacier Deep Archive, where you may want to archive data in the public cloud instead of leveraging tape. You may have hours to access this data, but it's incredibly low cost to store data in the long term. Now, we've got different service offerings right across the board that will suit your method of access. I'm not going to cover all of them now, but most of our partners will leverage each different service offering because each different service offering will have its place in your business, whether you need to access data on that frequent basis, whether it's slightly less frequently accessed, whether you want less durability, whether you want to archive, or whether you really want to archive for the longer term. Just looking at Deep Archive, it's really interesting that a lot of our customers are moving to Deep Archive so they don't have to manage their tape storage anymore. Now, Deep Archive is designed for 11/9 durability. You can recover that data, but it may take you a little longer than from a generic on-premises archive. But along with that comes best in industry cost for storing your data in the longer term. Now, why is durability important? If you're going to be archiving data, it's really important that you can get that data back at some point in the future. A traditional archive may be a tape archive. And if we look at statistically storing 2 copies of data on one site, well, that gives you 99.99% durability. There's still a chance of losing some data there. Or maybe you store 1 copy on 2 different sites, which could be a data protection best practice for most organizations. That increases your durability to maybe 5 nines. We've designed our AWS regions to ensure that you have 11 nines worth of durability, whichever S3 storage class you choose as being relevant to store your data. That's very important when you make a choice of public cloud provider to ensure that the durability is appropriate for your application. Now, briefly, Storage Gateway is an interesting technology that we use as often a first step in the hybrid cloud model. So let's say you have on-premises data and applications, and you don't want to re-platform them as you move to public cloud. Well, we can put in something we call a storage gateway, which will appear as though it's local storage, a local cache, if you will, which will then be moving data regularly into AWS. We have various flavors of the storage gateway family, from file gateway, where you can replace your file servers, store and access objects in S3, but make that appear as though it's a simple file store on premises. We have the local caching, which can be tuned to your applications, and it's completely transparent to the application. We then have something called volume gateway, which gives you block storage on premises. And again, that is very, very minimal disruption to integrate this with your existing services. But the block storage is actually stored in EBS, and we can provide snapshots and clones and all the good stuff, integration with our native backup services. Then we have tape gateway, which often is the most common gateway that customers choose, which is a drop-in replacement for a physical tape infrastructure. So if you have a traditional backup environment which writes to tapes today, it's very simple to redirect that tape write into AWS. So there's 3 different storage gateways: file gateway, file-based applications work without change. We've then got the volume gateway, which gives you SAN-like recovery into public cloud. We've then got the tape gateway, which allows you to easily switch tape backups to AWS. But a hybrid cloud model might not suit every single customer. So I seem to have magically missed over a slide there. Let's think about a traditional backup and restore environment where you've got your corporate data center, you've got your traditional backup environment, and you want to begin backing that up into, for example, AWS S3. In a hybrid environment, we can drop in one of our storage gateways, which allows the backup vendor to continue pointing to a tape array that then points into AWS S3. But as I mentioned earlier, that might not work for everyone. And this is really where the partner solutions come in and help drive value out of the data protection environment that you want to choose moving forwards. So in this instance, Rubrik, being the data protection provider, can actually integrate natively into AWS and provide that direct access to an S3 storage bucket without having to have any incremental AWS infrastructure on premises. And what's really interesting there is they can help you choose the best AWS storage class for the particular workload. Now, of course, we need a partner to help integrate all of these solutions together. And the reason why we're all here is because Bytes can help bring together the AWS with Rubrik that can actually offer complete solutions based on AWS building blocks. And this is a really good point for me to hand over to Mr. Connolly, who will be taking you through the Rubrik solution. And I'll be remaining on this session so that you can ask me any questions about anything that I've covered a little bit later. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom. Good morning, everyone. My name is James Connolly. I look after our strategic alliances for Rubrik in EMEA. Hopefully you can all see my screen now. So what I'll do today is I'll give you a bit of background on Rubrik. I'll talk through what I would call the two phases of our organization, and sort of walk you through the journey that Rubrik has been on with AWS. So in terms of Rubrik as an introduction, so we are a cloud data management company. And as I go through our go-to-market offering, hopefully that will become clear what we mean by that terminology. We're a 6-year-old company, been shipping our software for 5.5 years, got more than 3,000 customers globally, and you know, we're a very fast-growing Silicon Valley organization. So in terms of Rubrik and AWS, so you know, we are AWS are a very strong partner for Rubrik. We are part of a couple of partner programs within AWS. So we are what's called an ISV Accelerate partner. And then we've also recently been able to offer our platform via Marketplace. Now, with Marketplace, today, we're not a publicly listed Marketplace offering, but we can work with organizations, channel partners, such as Bytes, to build private marketplace offerings. So if an organization wants to transact via that route, we have the ability to do that. So you can use some of your commitments that you've made with AWS to transact and get Rubrik. We've obviously been through lots of different accreditations with AWS, advanced technology partner, storage competency partner, certain frameworks for public sector. And you know, Rubrik has been acknowledged by analysts and people like Gartner around our leadership status within this backup and recovery market. So what does Rubrik actually do? So this is what I would call a traditional data management infrastructure, something that you'll all be probably very familiar with. You would have some backup software sat on some servers, proxied out as it scales, replicated on different sites. You then might have a database doing some cataloging and indexing of data. Then you'd push data to a storage tier. Then it would often go off to tape, and then it would go off to the likes of an Iron Mountain or something like that for offsite archive. Now, when we look at that, you know, it doesn't really fit today's modern IT environments, and nothing's really changed in this market for the last 30 years. So this was one of the reasons Rubrik was created. Our founder, a guy called Bipul Sinha, he I guess saw this gap in the market that no innovation had been made, and created Rubrik. And when we look at what organizations are trying to do, they're trying to leverage cloud. They're looking at how they can get the economic benefits of cloud. They're looking at how they can simplify and automate their infrastructures for things like self-service. And they're looking at how they can make sure that infrastructure as well as data is inherently secure. And when we look at this traditional legacy model, it doesn't really fit any of those three strategic priorities. So we basically were created to consolidate, hyper-converge, whatever terminology you want to use, to consolidate all of those different architectural layers down to a single software fabric that scales as you grow, that's been built with cloud first in mind. We've been built on an open RESTful API, so we can help with all of the automation. And we actually have within Rubrik, a bit like GitHub, we have something called Rubrik Build, which is a community area for developers, people to share content around some of the automation, scripting, etc. they've done for other organizations to take advantage of. And then we've absolutely been built with security paramount to our infrastructure and the data that we protect. So very much Rubrik is a very TCO-led sale. So when I look back at that previous legacy architecture, consolidating those 7 or 8 different layers down to a single software fabric, you know, that creates very compelling TCOs for clients. And we typically see organizations save anywhere from 20 to 50, 60, 70% against these traditional legacy data protection vendors. It's also important to point out that, you know, Rubrik is absolutely not a storage company. We are a cloud data management company. So what we don't want to be doing is storing data on our platforms or anything like that. The quicker we move data out to cloud, the better. And I'll talk through in a minute some of the compelling reasons for doing that. So drilling down a little bit deeper into Rubrik. So the first thing is simplicity. You know, again, looking at that legacy environment, that could be a month's worth of professional services to implement and deploy that type of environment. With Rubrik, you know, the engineers within the company would hate me saying this, but we're more or less plug and play technology. You know, we would give an IP address to Rubrik, it would go and self-learn, find out what's out there, and then we can start applying policies to the workloads that we're then going to protect. And the policies is quite an interesting thing as well. So we've moved away from this scheduling of backup. So this workload backup every Monday night at 8 p.m. And then when IT come back the next day and they look at their dashboard, they get some red crosses where backups have failed, etc. We've moved away from that model. And what we do is we give workloads and data sets SLAs to say, right, this workload, we need to protect every 4 hours and push the data to XYZ location. And then what we do is we use our intelligence of our software to understand during that SLA window the most appropriate time to take that backup. So we may try at one point, and then if it's not the right time, we won't do the backup then, and we'll try again in a few minutes to make sure we use the optimum time. And what that means is, because we're working within an SLA policy, we don't have these failed backups anymore. We're a true enterprise class organization. You know, there are very few workloads out there now that we don't support. And then, you know, protecting, managing data is one thing, but obviously when you have an issue, it's all about that ability to recover quickly. So we have something called Livemount, which is our ability to instantly recover. So if there is a situation where something has gone down and you need to recover it very quickly, you can mount that application or workload on Rubrik and have it back up and running very quickly. As an example, to make that real, one of our banking clients had a SQL database outage, one of their sort of main tier 1 apps. And using their legacy tools, it took them 14 hours to restore that database. They've now moved to Rubrik, and that's down to 12 minutes. So that ability to recover very quickly is paramount to our technology. We've talked around, you know, cloud, our ability to push data very quickly to cloud. So the other key thing we do around cloud, and I'll talk through this a bit later as well in a bit more depth, but when we push data to cloud, we tag everything with metadata. So what that means is we understand what that data is and where it is. So then that gives us the ability to very granularly search and recover data. So if, for instance, you are archiving data to cloud and you want to find one specific file, using our GUI, which is again very clean, very user-friendly, you can start searching a file string and it will literally just pull up that one file, and then you can recover that individual file. So what that helps with is obviously that egress cost, pulling data back to reduce that and make that as cost efficient as possible. And then security. So, you know, we've been built with end-to-end encryption, so both at transit and at rest. And then we've also got what we call an immutable file structure. So underneath Rubrik, we are built on a proprietary file structure that we've developed. And what we've done is we've made that append only. So once data is written through Rubrik, it cannot be touched, tampered with, etc. So what that means is when organizations are, you know, being targeted with ransomware, as we all know, ransomware has become more intelligent. Historically, it would go and affect production, and then people would go to their backups and get them back up and running. It'd be painful, but they could do it. What we've seen with ransomware is it's now actually going targeting backups first, because they view that as a bit under the radar, won't be seen, and then it will start to infect production. And then obviously organizations would go to their backups, realize that's been corrupted, and then they're in a whole world of pain. We can absolutely protect against that because we give you confidence that once that data has been written through Rubrik, it is locked and cannot be touched. So therefore, we know we can recover you very quickly from ransomware. And as I talk through a bit later on, some of the enhancements we have around ransomware, we have specific modules and things to help with ransomware recovery. So in terms of a cloud journey, so as Tom alluded to earlier, the most frequent, often use case we see is just that ability to push data into the cloud for archive, long-term retention. Once it's there, what we can do is we can take that S3 image and we can spin it up into the IaaS capability within AWS and convert into AMIs and machines for things like DR, for things like test and dev. So instead of a developer going building some infrastructure in AWS, creating dummy data sets, they can take a recent backup with data, etc., and they can spin that up in a sandbox environment and start doing test and dev on that very quickly. And as I said, the other use case here is all around DR, the ability to spin workloads up and get them up and running in a DR scenario within AWS. And then the other key thing for Rubrik is, that cloud native piece. So our single software fabric can span across both on-premise, hybrid, or public cloud. So if you are running specific apps in AWS, from our single software fabric, we can protect those, give them the same SLA policies, etc. And then we talk through these different storage tiers. So again, Rubrik has the intelligence to be able to push data and tier data through the different storage tiers within AWS. Again, helping with that TCO to get the storage cost down to the most appropriate level depending on the data that we're protecting. And what we do is we do deduplication of the data, we compress, and then what we're doing is we're only sending, after we've done the first full backup, we only send incrementals after. So what that means is we're not chewing bandwidth, we're not sending lots of data all the time, we're sending just what's needed to make sure we are content and happy with the backups we've taken. And then another thing we've developed is called NAS Direct Archive. So we see a lot of organizations with big NAS filers, unstructured and structured data. And what they historically, what they wouldn't want to do is push that through Rubrik where it's stored on Rubrik for a short period of time, because of the size of that petabyte scale, it would potentially cost a lot of money. So what we did is we developed something called NAS Direct Archive. And what we do there is it literally just transiently passes through Rubrik, lands in AWS, and what we do is we just tag it with a metadata so we know what it is, we index it, and we have a single source of the data set so we can recover it very quickly. So what I've talked about to this point is what I would call Rubrik Chapter 1. That was our landing point into the market, being very cost efficient for organizations, giving them a modern technology to protect and manage data, and saving organizations lots of money, leveraging cloud, improving automation, etc. What we're doing now, and this is where what I would call the true data management piece comes in, is we've actually built a SaaS platform on top of Rubrik called Polaris. And what Polaris is it's, as I said, a SaaS platform, and what we can do is build different software modules to get more value from the data that we're protecting. So I'm just going to run through some examples of the modules that we've released to date, and obviously there's more coming down the line, and longer term we will open this up into partners for them to develop their own IP as well as end users. So the first one was just a it's called GPS. It's just a global management portal. So if you've got lots of different Rubrik clusters across the globe, it's just a single management portal, a single pane of glass visibility. The next one, which is very pertinent and topical at the moment, is called Radar. And this is all around enhancing that ransomware detection and recovery. So what we do with this module is we're not saying we're going to replace your security posture, get rid of all of your infrastructure, Rubrik is a one-stop shop. What we're saying is, if you've invested in Rubrik, we can help you detect and recover very quickly from ransomware. So what we do is, as data flows through, we look for anomalous behavior. So we use some machine learning, etc., and we look for anomalies in behavior. So for example, if there's a database it's normally a 2% change rate, and then we see like 12, 14% change rate, we'll flag that and say to the organization, perhaps you should look at this could be a ransomware breach. And then what organizations can do with Rubrik and with Radar is granularly go in and look at exactly what's happened when. And then if they view that has been a ransomware breach, we literally offer a one-click restore to the latest good version before the infection. So it's all around detection and recovery of ransomware. We have the ability to protect Office 365 and push data into cloud. And then I've talked around that cloud native, our ability to protect cloud native applications using this platform. This is currently in beta, but we're looking at also, we call it app flows, our ability to do automated failover DR, failover, failback. And then another module that we've, again, version 1 at the moment, it's called Sonar. And this is all around looking at the data we're protecting and flagging where we think there could be compliance breaches against it. So out of the box, we're looking at things like GDPR, HIPAA, PCI, and again, we're flagging to organizations where we think there could be a compliance breach around the data we're protecting, and giving them then the ability to drill down and look at what that is. So as a bit of a summary, backup, archive data, migrate to cloud, our ability for things like DR, and then our ability to help organizations detect and recover from ransomware. So in terms of moving forward, before I wrap, things that Rubrik can offer, obviously demos to organizations. We can help you with TCO modeling to make sure we're a good fit, deep dive workshops on specific areas of our portfolio, etc. So there's lots of things we can do to help organizations on their journey to cloud and simplifying and modernizing that data protection environment. So with that, I will hand back over to Matt to wrap up.
There we go, sorry. Cool, so thank you, James, thank you, Tom. Very, very good session. Just to kind of summarise, whilst we give you an opportunity to put ask any questions, so there's a questions box on the right-hand side, so feel free to type any questions there. There is one or two coming through, so I'll read them in a second. But just to touch on a point that Tom mentioned towards the end of his slides, there's a number of different ways that you can consume these types of technologies. Bytes, obviously being a partner of both Rubrik and AWS, have the internal expertise to come in and advise and help them design and implement. But in certain instances where potentially you don't have the manpower or want to manage these types of solutions, there is fully managed services available from Bytes, where we can take ownership of the whole data management strategy within your organization. So owning the management of the Rubrik appliances on your premise, and also managing that AWS backend. AWS, for those of you that have worked with them as a business, are very forthcoming to helping customers get onto the AWS platform, and with that there is many different funding programs available that Bytes as a strategic partner with AWS have access to. So looking at technologies like this and running things like POCs with back-end storage kind of cost covered for the first few months is absolutely something that we're able to do. So don't be scared of me to jump in and do a mass change of my backup and DR strategy today. Actually, we can really help you on that process. And as James said, you look at the overall TCO of these programs over a period of time, the cost savings are huge. But in that initial instance, we can really leverage the funding that is available from AWS to help you test and prove these services before you make that jump. Just to finalise, if you've got anything further back on, or you want to contact Bytes, you can go by your account manager, or there is an email on the bottom. But I have got one question that's come through, probably for you, James. So you may need to quickly come off mute. How is Rubrik licensed and purchased?
Hi there. So we have different options. So organizations can, so there's different things. So the way we are deployed is either you can buy appliances with Rubrik, which are based upon front-end terabyte of storage and workloads, or you can buy the software and run it on server hardware if you want, or if you are cloud native, obviously you can buy instances that run in the cloud. And it's all done by front-end terabyte of data that we're protecting and storing. And then we also have the ability to offer either perpetual licensing or subscription. So we have something called Rubrik Go, which is our subscription model based over a 3-year term, and then evergreening of hardware if you've gone down that route, etc. So there's lots of different models. It's very flexible. So yeah. And I guess the other key thing is, you know, we are not like some of the legacy vendors where you maybe buy the software or buy the hardware, and then over time you have lots of different add-on modules that you add and add more complexity. It's quite a simple, simplified model around the licensing.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. As I said at the start, you will be sent a recording of this webinar, and there is a quick feedback form if you do have the time to fill that out. That'd be really useful. I can't see any other questions coming through, so if you do have any on the back of it, as I said, that the email address is there at the bottom, or contact your account manager. But for that concludes today's webinar. I'd like to thank both Tom and James for their support, and look forward to speaking to you all in the future on the next one of these. Thank you guys. Have a good day.